Arizona Cardinals has spent the balance of the season proving to be one of the NFL's best. However, the question remains, do they have enough bullets in the arsenal in order to capture the sport's ultimate prize? That was the subject of my Tuesday afternoon conversation with Steve Zinsmeister, the producer of the Doug and Wolf Show in Phoenix, as he answered the question on whether or not the Cardinals could seal the deal. First of all, Steve, we want to welcome you to the Two-Man Advantage podcast, and we're excited to talk some Arizona Cardinals football with you this afternoon.
Well, thank you, Kevin. I appreciate it. Happy to join you.
So when we look at the Cardinals season, obviously Carson Palmer plays a big role in what the Cardinals do. He has 35 touchdowns, and he's passed for over 4,000 yards this season. So can you tell me whether you think he should be considered for MVP, and how important do you think he is to the Cardinals engine this season?
Yeah, that's a great point. It's interesting that you start out there because prior to the season, all anybody would talk about nationally or locally here in Arizona was how Carson Palmer will hold up after a second major knee injury. I think his health has a lot to do with the success of this team, and everything's been based on him. He set franchise records in basically everything this year: yards, touchdowns, 300-yard passing games, passer rating, 3 or more touchdowns per game. He set records in all those things. And then the Cardinals are 29-9 when he starts for them. I think people don't realize that this team was this good last year before he went down and they had to turn to Drew Stanton and then later Ryan Limley. So he's very important to what they do. But I would say for the MVP race, I think Cam Newton's pretty much got it wrapped up in my mind. I know a lot of people agree with me on that. But if there is anybody I would want to throw into that mix, it's probably Carson Palmer. But I mean, Cam Newton's playing another game right now. He's a different type of quarterback. He's kind of changed the way we look at quarterbacks, and you can't discount a 15-1 season for the Panthers. They've done something historic there, and I think that that definitely needs to be well attributed.
And when we look at the defensive side of the football, obviously the Cardinals remain top 10 in almost every category, but they'll enter this playoff run with out Tyrann Mathieu, who is sort of their do-everything player for them. So can you tell me how you think his loss will impact their defense?
Yeah, and we've already gotten a little glimpse of that in the Packer game and then the Seattle game. So 2 games now we've seen without him. And I think before he went down, he was probably a Defensive Player of the Year candidate in a few people's minds. I know Pro Football Focus said he was tops in the league in a bunch of different categories, defending the pass. And really the interesting thing about Tyrann Mathieu, and I said this last year, is that he's probably their best cover corner from last year, with Patrick Peterson's health being questionable. Antonio Cromartie kind of mailed it in at the second half of the year. Gerard Powers, just not as talented as Tyrann Mathieu. So he was really their best cover corner last year. That has since changed since Peterson's gotten much better this season. But he's also one of their better pass rushers. He's one of their harder hitters. It's like you said, he can really do everything for this defense. So without him, I would rather lose him than a couple other people, and that's not a knock against him. They're just so deep in the secondary, and when they have guys like Rashad Johnson, who plays a pivotal role in that defense now with Mathieu out, they're definitely missing a great player. Don't get me wrong on that, but I think they can survive without him, and we've already seen that they can create a pass rush that kind of helps that secondary. We saw it against the Packers. They had 9 sacks, 8 against Aaron Rodgers. It definitely hurts to not have him, but it's not the end of the world for sure.
And when we take a look at Larry Fitzgerald, he obviously is reinventing himself as a slot receiver in Bruce Arians' offense. So can you talk me through his transition and what he means to the Cardinals from a leadership standpoint, both on and off the field?
Sure. I think you hit that on the head there. He kind of has transitioned to the slot a little bit. He's established himself, I think, as one of the better pass blockers as well as run blockers. on the inside and on the outside, and that's done wonders for their running game, and David Johnson especially, and Chris Johnson earlier in the year. But also for the receivers, there was a game where he and Michael Floyd ran the same route on accident, and Carson Palmer didn't know who to throw it to, so he said he threw it between the two of them and let them dish it out. And Michael Floyd ended up catching the ball, and he turns around, and Larry turned around, and he had to put up a big block, and then Michael Floyd ran all the way to the end zone. And that really just, to me, embodied exactly what you were saying, how Fitz has turned a corner in his career, and he's really starting to do some other things. He's very unselfish in that way. And ultimately, it's got some good karma for him because everything seems to be going his way. He's having a career year, and hopefully he can finish off that career year with a ring.
And when we look at the totality of the Cardinals season, what do you think has been the most impressive aspect to this individual season?
I think the most impressive thing to me is the success of some of the older players. I think Carson Palmer, people in Arizona really expected it out of him. We knew how good he was going into this year, and everything we heard was that he was going to get better. You look at Chris Johnson, a guy who came in off the street in training camp. He got shot earlier in the year. He still had a hole in his shoulder when he came to camp. So, I mean, just very impressed with how they picked him up, and he seemed to fit really quick. A guy like Dwight Freeney, who came in mid-year and has put up 8 sacks, I believe it is, and he's just really given them an instant pass rush that they desperately needed. And then Larry Fitzgerald, like we already talked about, aging, but seems to be getting better with age. He's fine wine, I guess, in that sense. So I think the most impressive thing is the way Steve Keim has put this team together, that they don't have to be a bunch of young studs. They got a lot of veterans that can really contribute, and I think that's a testament to their front office and what they've built here.
And when we take a look at Bruce Arians as a head coach, what do you think sets him apart? Because he's a different breed. He kind of speaks his mind and tells everybody what he thinks. So what do you think, considering the fact that it took him so long to get a head coaching job, why do you think he's so successful in Arizona?
Yeah, it did take a while, but it's obviously paying off for him. I think the biggest thing for him that I've noticed is he's not afraid to bring in people who know as much or even more than he does. You look at his coaching staff. I mean, you got some guys who are really up there in age. I think he's already a top 3 coach in age in the NFL, and then you add in guys like Tom Pratt, who coached in Super Bowl I. You got Tom Moore, a bunch of guys like that, Stump Mitchell, who just have a ton of knowledge, a well of knowledge, if you will, and they can really put that to use on this team, and they've done that. And I think that the knowledge they have and applying that to this veteran team and some of the young guys as well has really shown its true colors this season. They're really impressive.
Now, when we look at the season finale for the Cardinals, they kind of got robbed by the Seattle Seahawks. So do you think they can use that loss as motivation or fuel to get them through a long playoff run?
Don't get me wrong; it was not very impressive at all on the Cardinals' end, and I won't say I was shocked because it was a Week 17 loss where the Cardinals didn't have a ton riding on it. The Seahawks had nothing riding on it, so they had nothing to lose, and that may have worked in their advantage. But as for the Cardinals, I mean, the only way they were going to get the number 1 seed was if Carolina was going to lose to Tampa Bay, and that just wasn't going to happen. That wasn't in the cards. So I think with the Cardinals' loss to Seattle, it's not the end of the world. It is a little bit of a wake-up call, a little kick in the butt, if you will, and I think they'll use it like that to kind of rekindle the fire and get back in the groove they were on when they won all those games in a row that they did. So I don't think this loss is a preview of what we'll see in the playoffs. I think it could be a good wake-up call, though, for not just Bruce Arians and his staff, but definitely the players and their focus.
Now, when we look at under-the-radar players, who are some players that are flying under the radar that you think can contribute to a prolonged playoff run for the Cardinals?
Yeah, I think when we touched on it a little bit with Tyrann Mathieu' absence, Rashad Johnson is an interesting player that not a lot of people outside of Arizona know a whole lot about, and he's not even really a starter per se in a lot of situations for the Cardinals, but they call him a coach on the field. Actually, some of the players refer to him as Nick Saban on the field. He's kind of like the guy that lines them all up, calls out formations. He's a very smart football player, and I know that when he's done with his career, he wants to go into coaching. Rashad Johnson's an interesting one in that sense that he really brings the defense together, and when they were missing him with injuries a couple weeks ago, I know that was a bit of a concern. So he flies under the radar. I think Dwight Freeney is another one that kind of flies under there. Can he create a pass rush without blitzing? Because we know this is a team that loves to blitz, but that kind of leaves your secondary on an island. And when you don't have Tyrann Mathieu back there, it helps a little bit when you can create a pass rush with only the 4 guys on the defensive line. And Dwight Freeney's done an amazing job of being able to get to the quarterback. He's got some strip sacks, so that helps quite a bit as well. And then as for a third name, I think David Johnson, who people are really starting to get familiar with, a rookie who scored 12 touchdowns before he even started a game at running back, or 8 touchdowns, I guess, 12 total. And, since he started, he's got fresh legs because he didn't have to play in such a big role early on in the season. So I think David Johnson and establishing the run game could be a really big thing for Bruce Arians and his offense, because then he can call some plays down the field, which we all know he really loves to do.
Absolutely. Now, when we look at the Cardinals, based on the way they're playing now, do you think they have a shot to win the Super Bowl? And what do you think they'll stack up in the NFC?
In the NFC, well, I look at it the same way in the NFC as I do in total of the NFL. I think the only team that's up there with them right now is Carolina. And again, a 15-1 record can't be discredited. I think it's amazing what they've done. So I give Carolina all the credit in the world for doing that. Anybody, I mean, you could play Jacksonville 16 times and it would still be pretty impressive to go 15-1. But I think for the Cardinals, they're as good a team as you can really have roster-wise. I think this team is built for the Super Bowl. They're built to win now. They're not built to win in the future. Carson Palmer said that recently. He said, we're not built to win down the road. We want to win now. And they're pretty deep in a lot of areas. There is no real weakness for this team. There are some areas where you can improve, sure. And we saw that obviously in the Seahawks loss, there are some things that they need to shore up. But I don't think it's any major concerns. There's no real point of attack for any other opposing team. I think they stack up really well. And I think if this isn't a Super Bowl team, if this isn't a Super Bowl roster going into the playoffs, I don't know whose is.
Steve, we want to thank you for your time and for joining us this afternoon on the Two-Man Advantage Podcast.
Well, thank you, Kevin. Appreciate it.
Have a great day, buddy.
Same to you.